Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Bliss Bakery, where you'll get your wholesome slice of life. I'm Rachel, and it's just me today. So, I know it's been a little bit of time since I've been posting quite consistently, and maybe you're all wondering what happened because I was on a roll. I was on fire. I had done 20 something episodes. And the way that I was recording these podcasts was that I would do maybe like 10 per season and I would record them all ahead of time. And then I knew I could post them really consistently week on week. But by the time it got to season 3, which was actually recorded the first half of it last year, I did 5 episodes during my break transition between my jobs. And then I thought I would have enough buffer, so I just launched the season. And then I stopped posting because things just got so busy in life. Like, starting a new job is crazy. You just have so much onboarding, and basically every part of your focus just goes into work. So, unfortunately, I didn't end up recording any more episodes, even though I had a lot planned, and I still might end up doing them. But I've also been thinking pretty deeply in terms of what I want to do with this podcast as it goes on. I thought, you know what, when I started this podcast, what I wanted to do was just talk about things that were on my mind. Like when I would be driving alone and have all these thoughts, I'd be like, you know what, I wish I could share these with someone. And that was what I had hoped to do in the conversations with my friends. I still have many thoughts in my head and not a lot of time to schedule with friends yet. So I thought I would still just try and make some episodes by myself, and hopefully you guys enjoy this. Well, this episode is titled Who the F Am I? That's basically the story of my life right now. It's just confused, lost. Yeah, I've been working a lot. I've been going through it with personal life stresses, one after the other. I have been going through health issues, burnout, figuring out who I want to be in life and what I even want to do with my career. And I have a ton of uncertainty around just like where I'm going. And I don't know, I think it's interesting because to others, it may seem like I've got it together, working on my career, working on my hobbies like my podcast and my YouTube, and enjoying the physical sports I do and all that kind of stuff. But no, I'm probably going to expose myself quite a bit today because, yeah, it's a mess in here. Let's start by talking about this feeling of being lost in our lives, because it can't just be me. I think just talking to literally everyone around me at the moment who's in their like mid to late 20s or entering their 30s, everyone is kind of lost. They're either looking at career breaks, career changes, moving overseas. And I can't count how many times I've had the conversation where people have been like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I don't know what I'm doing in my career. Should I change my career? And I'm like, same. Just, yeah, I feel you. I guess like when I was young, thinking about the age I'm at now, like late 20s, scary. I thought I would have it all figured out. Or I guess when I was young, I was also very unsure about like just who I was. And I thought by the time I'm in my late 20s, I'm going to feel really confident in work. And I can't wait to get to that time where, I just know what I'm doing. I know how to carry myself professionally. I know who I am. I know like who my friends are around me. And, I'm just living at that point. I figured some of those things out. Like in high school, I think that I was lost in a way of insecurity in myself, how to react to situations, not really knowing like what work was. I guess over the years, like I've gained a better sense of security in myself. But I think that I'm at this period in my life where things are just a different kind of confusing. I guess like the kind of questions that we face in the different periods of our lives just change. Like maybe you never get over this feeling of being lost, but you're just lost in different kind of topics. So nowadays what I'm feeling is this very much quarter life crisis of like, what do I even actually want to do with my life? Like, what do I want to focus my time on? And how am I meant to get there? Because when there's so much going on in life, it just feels really hard to pause and pick or reflect on what you want to focus on, like what you want to spend your time on. I was looking at the Harvard Business Review research and just like trying to figure out this thing around quarter life crisis, because I've talked about it quite a bit on this podcast and it feels like we're all going through it. It was actually one of my most listened to episodes, so clearly people resonate. But a quarter life crisis really refers to this period that starts in your late 20s and it's caused by this feeling of, I think they are talking about it being locked down into commitment at work or at home or in a relationship or in your job, where people take on jobs, they rent apartments, they enter relationships, and then they feel trapped in this sense of pretend adulthood. And at some point, they might separate from these jobs or social groups and they feel more lonely. So they spend the worst part of this crisis, and I'm literally reading this verbatim now, reflecting and recalibrating their plans, alone and isolated, until eventually they go out and explore new hobbies, interests, and social groups, finally emerging at the other side of the crisis happier, more motivated, and with a greater sense of clarity. So, what the Harvard Business Review states was that stress actually increases sharply in people in the age of their late 20s to their 30s. And then it steadily increases through your 30s and your 40s. And then stress will start to sharply decline during that period of retirement. So, I guess we're all screwed until we're like 50, 60, right? No, but what they have found as well is when you're in your kind of late 30s to 40s, your emotional response to stress will start to decline. So you learn how to manage that stress and you learn how to, I guess, respond to it in a more healthy way, which is why when you're in your like the period that we're in right now, the stress is high and your ability to respond to it is low. And I guess that's what causes this feeling of just chaos and stress and lost in our lives. So it is normal, I guess, but it doesn't make it feel any better. Anyway, I thought that was really interesting. I guess I wanted to talk about being lost in my content role as like a key part of this episode today, because I do make a lot of content. I make these podcast episodes and YouTube videos and then TikToks, and I'm kind of everywhere. So you'll probably all realize like I have a lot of different creative outlets and I've tried a lot of things, but I feel like that's actually what's confused me even more, because I kind of like all the things and I get these surges of motivation when, you know, a video or a short goes viral and then I'm like, oh, I should focus on my time in YouTube, or like I should focus on my time in TikTok. I guess one of the things for me is I don't feel like I've ever truly succeeded in content. And that's probably been a big source of demotivation and struggle for me, because I spend so much time creating content. I guess like I've learned the difference as well between social media and content creation, where you can create content and that will take a bunch of time. But then social media is the part where you're promoting that content and knowing like which channels to actually broadcast it to and what keywords to use and what teasers to make. And I think I've learnt that I really love making content, but I'm very bad at social media. And so that has been, I guess, a realization that I've had lately. I've just like been reflecting on the things that I've tried in content. Things like fashion, I've tried beauty, I've tried travel, I've tried DIY stuff, work, podcasts, etc. And in speaking to friends around me who have done quite well, they'll talk a lot about picking a niche. And there's this like constant tension for me between picking a niche versus posting just like whatever you want to post, because this is a hobby and like you want to have fun doing it. Like I already work is this work or is this something that is a creative outlet for me? So it's really like there's these two roads when it comes to creating content. And maybe it goes back to this book that I talked about in a previous episode, Ego is the Enemy, but it's kind of like, do you want to be someone or do you want to do something? And in this case, like those two roads do not overlap, because if I want to be someone, it feels like I really need to double down and like figure out what the audience wants to watch and like how to show them value. Then there is this other side of me where I'm like, I'm doing this for fun. I want to do something. And the something that I want to do is, one day I'll wake up and I want to make a video about fashion. And I just want to make that video. And then the next day I'm like, hey, I'm going to the snow this weekend, so I want to make a snow vlog. And I'll do that. And then the day after, or like the week after, I'm like, hey, let's make an hour podcast with my friend talking about toxic friendships. That obviously to an audience or a community doesn't make much sense, because they're like, whoa, you are taking me in like 5 different directions at once. Who are you? What am I even coming here to watch? That is the eternal struggle that I am having right now, because it's kind of like these two perspectives which I constantly teeter between. I think it also kind of goes into this topic around, I guess, like originality and success. I've noticed in the period post-COVID, a lot of people started creating content, and it was really cool because it changed the way that influencers were defined. With social media, influencers can get really big quickly when they've done something right and they've invested in that, like they invested their time into that thing. Every time, someone blows up and you're kind of like, oh, that's a really cool thing that they did, or I really like their aesthetic right now in this like period of my life. I think inevitably as well, I try to like end up copying the things that they do or the aesthetics, because I'm watching their video and I'm like, you know what, I'm really inspired. I want to create something like that because it just looks so nice and so good. I find that part of that feeling of lost in content is like losing yourself in trying to be like someone else versus trying to just create something that's unique and creative. And when the market itself is so saturated, like everyone is an influencer these days, there is not a ton of original content out there. Even me just rambling in this podcast, I'm sure if you looked on Spotify, there's probably like 100 other Asian girls just like me talking about creating content and social media and have their own podcast where they talk about the same topics. But at the same time, you just find doing that is like very cathartic and fun. And you see other people doing it and you're like, you know what? I want to try that too. I think that's another piece of tension that people who are creating content may feel. I guess it's like wanting to be original and wanting to do something truly creative and artsy, and then kind of seeing what works with the algorithm and having to create a bunch of stuff that just basically follows that in order to build your presence in a community. And I think that that's actually a really, really difficult kind of feeling to shake in which direction to go. The other thing around, I guess, feeling disconnected from content is this idea that you have to be a certain archetype of an influencer in order to be successful. And it definitely feels like when you see someone like they were made to be an influencer. They are people who are like funny and extroverted, and they have those loud personalities and they're unafraid to be cringe in public. And then in terms of their aesthetic, they just look effortlessly like cool. They're always dressed well, fashionable. It's kind of hard to feel like if you're not part of that mold, that you should even like create content or be an influencer. And I think it's just kind of hard because when you see those things and you realize, well, I'm not really like that, you kind of start questioning, like, should I even be doing this? Realistically, I know that's not the truth, and people will be like, no, anyone can be successful. But I think it's kind of like when you see the success stories, it makes you see things in a different kind of way. For example, I guess I wouldn't call myself extroverted at all, and not particularly like banterous or funny. And so in some videos, or you may have noticed in some of my previous podcasts, like I tend to get really nervous. And so like I laugh a lot. And sometimes I feel like I should be really funny in my videos or like act in a certain way that you see everyone else acting when they're in their content. But then I feel disconnected to that because sometimes I'm just like, I just want to be chill and I'm a bit more serious and just like calm. I teeter between like, I need to be in really high energy and spirits and like make it really engaging for people to want to watch this versus be who I really am and just like chill out. Or another example around this is aesthetically as well. You want to look the best that you can on camera, obviously, because other people are watching you. And you see all these people when they're dressed up really fashionably and they look really cool. And I'm always like, if I'm going to create content, I should put on makeup or I should dress up really nice. And that way, like, I'll feel really good about myself. But in reality, I'm like, actually, I don't ever wear makeup and I can't be bothered. And it's such an effort. So I guess that's what also stops me from being able to easily and sustainably create content because it feels like I'm actually changing myself quite a lot in order to, just start filming a video. So there is always this kind of tension between acting like someone else, which is not like entirely out of your character. It's kind of like my personality could be like that, versus between knowing who you are truly and just being able to comfortably be that person. Yeah, I don't have any of the answers to this, but you can see how this is me spiraling into just feeling like really lost. uh, it kind of goes into questioning like, should I even be an influencer? Because it all goes back to why are we even creating content and videos in this day and age? Like for me, I think I love the creativity. I love being inspired, but it definitely takes a lot of time, which is very in conflict with the nature of the social media industry where volume matters and it's all about like pumping out things really quickly and being consistent because the market's so saturated. When you then like start to put in all your effort and you're really proud of the end result that you produce, but it gets like 200 views, honestly, it's kind of like, I am really proud of myself, but it still kind of sucks because you're like, I put all this time and effort into it and I want to share it with people, but literally no one's watching it anyway. So it doesn't feel very motivating, I think. That's always been on my mind as I make videos. I'll be like, I don't care about the views. I don't care. I'm just happy creating what I'm creating. But then after like 5 videos that you've posted have gotten like 200 views, you're kind of like, is the return worth my investment at this point? But then what happens is I'll end up meeting people in real life, just like out of nowhere, and they might recognize me or they'll say like, oh, I watch all your videos. I really enjoyed them. And that is super encouraging because those moments make you feel like, oh, actually, like, you know what? One person did get something out of it and that made it feel worth it. Like, for example, I went on a snow trip a couple of weeks ago and we stopped at a rental shop and I was getting a hot chocolate from the cafe and the guy was like, oh, do you make videos on YouTube? I think I've seen all of them where you've gone to Japan. And he knew like the friends that I went to Japan with and he took a photo of us. And like, that was really exciting because I was like, literally, I have like 500 people who have watched my Japan vlogs, for example. And who knew that like just in some random place 6 hours away from Sydney, this one person has watched them. It's always like these moments of excitement that then inspire you. By the way, thank you, Gareth, for inspiring me. And then having these long periods where you don't have that much like face-to-face interaction with people and you're like, is any of this even worth it? You're probably all wondering like, why is she rambling about social media and content creation and all this stuff? Like, what does that have anything to do with the topic of this episode, which is who am I and I am so lost? But the point of this is I guess, talking about identity and how it can be influenced by these external factors and like the things that you do that you then start to attach to your identity and knowing who you are. People care what other people think about them, and that's just simply a fact. Like, you can say as much as you want, I don't really care what anyone thinks about me. And in reality, it's probably like a very, very small percent of the population who truly don't care. And that is just like in our biological nature, because humans are social animals and caring what other people think is a survival instinct. This all goes back to like 50 million years ago. Our ancient primate ancestors had to band together to fend off predators, share food, and stay warm. The members of the old gang that didn't fit in or were considered threats were shunned, and they were left to be eaten by a million primeval predators or to starve to death. So that is to say, it is built in our evolution and our like biology to just be social creatures and care what other people think about us. And I think that your identity itself can really be tied to these external influences, like the friendships around you, or work, or your achievement, or your hobbies. And I think those things end up defining your identity. So when you start feeling quite lost in those things, that then results in this sense of loss in your own identity and not being sure about yourself. So, for example, for friendships, I'm sure you've all heard this before. You're the combination of like the 5 closest people around you. You get influenced by their values and their priorities, which is especially dangerous if you're prone to external validation like I am. I've even noticed this over time. Like when I was in uni, I was surrounded by a lot of people who cared about corporate and work and their careers and were very ambitious, and where everyone wanted to do consulting. And that influenced my identity a lot because I was like, you know what? I want to be a consultant, which I actually didn't. And then for a period of time, I spent a lot more time with people who cared about OzTag. And I mean, that's still the case today. I'm still friends with all those people. But when I was spending a lot of time in OzTag and like playing literally 5 days a week and like 3 teams every night, that was like the thing that I cared about, because no one cared about work there. Like we don't talk about our careers and, you know, what jobs, and people don't care what you do. They care about OzTag and literally like what teams are you playing and how good you are. And that became the thing that I truly valued, because I was like, I want to be the best I can be. Like all these people around me care about this thing. I care about that too. And so my identity became OzTag. You kind of go through these phases of like seeing people more and being influenced by their values and priorities. But once you leave those people, like you start seeing them less, then your values and priorities change. And then you're kind of like, well, what do I value now? Like, what am I doing? And I'm probably in that period right now where I'm like, all of our friends, we don't really care about Ostag anymore. Like, what do we value? Maybe it's snow. From a work perspective, it's this idea that like I'm a product manager. I have been a product manager my whole life, which is also not that long ago. It's kind of like 5 years ago. But it's kind of interesting because I mentioned this with Jane in a previous podcast, where it's kind of like when you first meet someone, the first thing you usually tend to talk about is like, hi, I'm blah, and this is what I do for work. And your identity gets tied to your work already so much in just such a short span of time. And so for me, as I'm like coming into this period of my life where I feel confused about work and I'm like, should I career change? Should I be doing something different? Do I even like product management? Another part of me is holding myself back, being like, wait, no, but you are a product manager. Like you've spent your uni degree working towards this. Like this is everything you've always wanted since you were in high school. So what would it mean to not be a product manager anymore? Like it's really strange. Similarly for YouTube, like this is where I'm talking about feeling lost as a content creator, because it's kind of like, well, I've been doing this for 10 years and before that I was blogging and I've always created some kind of content in my life. So there's been some points in my life recently, and you'll probably all notice because I've made less videos, but I'm kind of like, do I want to do YouTube anymore? Should I quit? should I just stop making content and like do something else? And again, I'm kind of like, but that's my identity. Like, I have been a YouTuber for as long as I can remember, and I've always been doing this, and people know me as heylinni, and I make YouTube videos. And like when I start new jobs and things, it's always my interesting fact. I'm like, I have a YouTube channel or I have a podcast. And to not have that anymore is a very scary thing, because you're like, well, that is such a key part of my identity. So if I stop doing that, then who am I? I guess like touching on achievements as an external influence, it again is something that is not entirely in your control. But I talked about this, I think, also previously in a podcast where for a period of time I was talking to this coach in my career. And one of the things that she said to me really early on was, if you were to peel back all of your achievements like an onion, then who are you? Like, how would you describe yourself to people, or what value do you find in yourself? And at the time, I found that really, really hard to answer, because I couldn't define myself without my achievements. Like, I'm a high achiever and I'm very proud of the things that I do. So when I don't have achievements, I felt like I didn't know who I was. I didn't have anything else outside of that I valued myself by. And it's been a couple of years since then. So I have since like done some work to find myself in that way, picked up hobbies that didn't necessarily have to translate to either making money or like winning something. I think that that's just another one that is an interesting kind of influence when it comes to who am I? I suppose like when you're thinking about all of these different external influences, what gets really, really tricky is, what if all those different things span different paths? Kind of like, I want to be, someone who is a high achiever, and I want to be a product manager, and I want to like do really well at work, but I also want to be a snow girly, but I also want to be a content creator. And my friends around me really care about, I don't know, let's say like tennis. And so I really want to play tennis as well and be that kind of girl. But we have to recognize that time is scarce. Like, you can't do everything at once. You can't be 15 different people at once. Like, you do need focus. And when you've done some of those things for so long, it's really hard to let go of that being a part of who you are. A helpful piece of advice, though, around this, that I was talking to my friend Rachel about this the other month, I guess. I was saying, like, having this same conversation where I was essentially like, I have so little time and I want to do so many things. Should I keep doing content? Like, should I keep doing YouTube? She gave me a really helpful kind of reflection where sometimes, in order for you to take on new opportunities or forge forward in life, you do have to let go of things, because it's kind of like being a hoarder, right? You can't like hold on to everything and then be able to fit more and more in that space. Otherwise, it gets cluttered and you just get more and more upset over time and more dissatisfied. Let's use the example of furnishing your house. If I want to buy a new couch, I have to get rid of my old couch, or I have to get rid of some furniture I have to make space for this new beautiful couch, because I can't just like keep both and have one in or have two in the same room. Like, that's just not going to work. It's not going to create enough space for me to live comfortably. And so I guess it's about thinking about that a little bit more and figuring out, what are the new things that I want to be creating space for, and what are the old things that I'm willing to let go of. Lastly, I guess what I wanted to kind of go through is, what are people then trying to do to find themselves in life? Because I think we are all going through it. And from what I've seen, people are traveling or uprooting their lives and essentially like either going on a 6-month trip or even just moving. Like, I don't know how many people have moved to Europe and London or New York that I've seen. And it's actually really sad, because I'm like, every time I start being friends or like making closer friends with someone, it turns out that they're actually planning to move to Europe. But they're all just trying to find themselves as well and like wanting to have different experiences. The other thing that people are really talking about these days is like career changes. Like that is the biggest thing that I keep hearing is, should I quit my job and just do something different, go in a different direction, change companies or industries even? Should I quit my job and just do social media? And yeah, it feels like a lot of us are kind of going through that at the moment. And I'm not thinking about quitting because I literally just joined my job, but I am definitely having these like bigger thoughts around what is it that I actually want to do in my life. Like, I don't know if I want to ascend the corporate ladder and be a senior well, I actually do want to be a senior product manager again because I was one. But I don't know if I want to be like a manager of people. Do I then want to be a VP of product? Do I want to be a CEO? It's not entirely clear what the alternate path is without feeling like I'm growing. Some people take a sabbatical and just take that time to reflect, which I would love to do. Like that is such a dream. I think that in order for you to truly find yourself, you need to create the time and space to do that. And it's not easy to reflect and figure out who you are when you've got a million things going on at once and you've got full-time work and you're kind of just like day in, day out executing. Firstly, you need time to just like chill and take a break and detach for a few weeks at least. And then that's when the thoughts start coming to you in terms of like, okay, where do I want to go next? Who do I want to be? And I think in order to get to that point, you kind of have to step outside the bubble of normal life that you have going on, which is why I think a sabbatical is such a valuable experience. Unfortunately, it's not viable for everyone because the cost of living, I suppose, in Sydney is just way too high. Like, we got to work, we got to pay off our mortgages. So that's something that I would love to plan to do, but I don't see it as something I can do in like the next year or two, unfortunately. I guess like the other thing that you can do is just go on autopilot and just accept this life that you're living and be present. Like, I don't know what direction I'm heading in still. I have so many things that I want to do. But at the end of the day, I think it's really important to constantly remind ourselves that we are young. Like, being in your late 20s feels scary because you're almost 30, and then people feel like when you're 30, your life is basically over. But you basically put it into perspective. Like, 30 is still really young. And they say actually when you're in your 30s, those are the best times of your life because you have started to figure things out. You've started to settle down. You're just, I'm scared to say this and jinx it because I'm like, by the time you're 30, you're just going to be living. But no, that's like what I said when I was a teenager going into my 20s. So maybe you have a different set of worries and lostness that you feel in your 30s. In any case, I think it's always important to remind ourselves that we're young, our values and our identity is always going to be fluid. Like, maybe we'll never find ourselves and we'll never figure out like I am, exactly who I am and like where I want to be and all those things, because as humans, we just always want more, and events happen and that causes change. And those are things that we always kind of need to just adapt and get used to. So yeah, I think that whilst I am feeling very lost, and I hope that I haven't just caused you all to spiral with me, because I do have a silver lining to all of this and a bright side here, which is one of the most important things is just to remember that we have time. We have time and we need to appreciate that time that is in front of us right now. Literally like staying in the present and acknowledging this is who I am right now and these are the challenges and like the growth that I am about to face, and that's exciting, rather than always trying to be someone else or feel dissatisfied that I don't know who I am and trying to better like develop my identity and being like, in 2 years when I figure it out, it's going to be over for you all. Like, I'm going to know who I am, because the more we kind of chase that future of the ideal, I guess, like we lose sight of the time now. And it kind of reminds me of The Office, a scene where Andy says like, I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them, because literally, I think these are the good old days. Like this and whatever period you're in right now, this will always be the good old days because we're only gonna get older, and we're always going to look back kind of wistfully and be like, that period of time in my life was great. Even when we're facing challenges and things that on the day to day annoy or frustrate us or just like feel really shit, those things are going to fade to become distant memories. And at the end of the day, we're going to remember that time where I could just freely run, or like, I think about when I was a kid and I used to do gymnastics and I was like really flexible, and I would be like, wow, touching my toes is really easy, or I can just do the splits really easily. As you get older, I noticed people were less flexible, and I was like, but how? Why? And now I am those people, and I look back on my like days of young flexibility and I'm literally like, those were the good old days. And so, yeah, it is always about appreciating still the things that I have in the present, even as I feel quite lost and not complete in my life. That's where I am right now. No answers, just thoughts in this episode. And literally, I don't know how entertaining this was to you. I hope you enjoyed this reflection and maybe it helped you think a little bit more about yourself and reflecting on who you are and your identity and how you're feeling at this period in your life. If you do have thoughts or even advice to share, I would love to hear it. So please include that in the comments or in the Spotify poll. I think you can leave comments in Spotify now, which is pretty cool. Let's keep the conversation going, and I will see you all next time. Bye.